Before we begin this amazing story, I want to hear from you. Tell me down in the comments where you're watching from, whether it's the busy streets of New York, the wide skies of Dallas, or the golden coast of Los Angeles. I love seeing how far these Wild West tales travel. It makes every story feel like it's shared around one big fire. Changed cities according to story, the evening light fell across the prairie like an old hymn, low, aching, and golden. The sky stretched wide and endless, a sheet of bruised violet deepening with dusk. Dust curled along the dirt road that wound toward the Whitlock Ranch, a place where silence clung tighter than the wind. Elias Whitlock, a rancher of 35 years, moved slowly between his corral posts, rope in one hand, a tin cup of bitter coffee cooling in the other. His life was measured by such small rituals: mending fence lines, feeding cattle, stoking the fire at dawn. He had lived alone for years, carrying silence like a second skin. The town called him a ghost of a man, hard, quiet, and unwilling to let anyone in. But that evening, his solitude was interrupted. Out of the tall grasses stumbled a woman, barefoot, dirt-streaked, and clutching the last of her strength. She wore a torn dress, the hem shredded by stones and thorns. Her hair, once carefully kept, fell wild across her shoulders, and her eyes carried the shadow of storms weathered too long. She collapsed against the porch rail, breath ragged, voice almost gone. "Let me stay," she whispered, words splintering on her lips. "I'll be your wife." Elias stood frozen, the tin cup trembling in his grip. He had seen strays before, hungry drifters, broken men begging work, but never a woman like this. 30 or so by the look of her, but her face bore more than years. It bore hunger, betrayal, and the raw ache of survival. "Ma'am," he said low, his voice like gravel, "you're half dead. Best get yourself to town." But she only shook her head, eyes wide, desperate. "No town. No one there wants me." He almost told her to go anyway. The last thing he needed was a stranger under his roof, especially a woman. Folks would talk. Folks always talked. But when she tried to stand, her knees gave out, and she crumpled into the dirt with a sound that struck him deeper than any bullet. With a curse under his breath, Elias stooped and gathered her in his arms. She weighed little more than a sack of grain, her skin burning with fever. He carried her inside, laying her gently upon the narrow cot by the fire. Her name, he learned later, was Clara Mayhalis. Her story trickled out between restless nights and whispered mornings. She had been a seamstress once in the town of Dalton's Crossing, but a crooked foreman and a few cruel tongues had left her name tarnished, her shop closed, her small savings stolen. She had nowhere to go, no can take her in. She had wandered for days until her body betrayed her. "I can work," she said one evening, her voice still fragile. "I can cook, mend, tend the garden. Just let me stay." Elias avoided her gaze, busying himself with sharpening his knife. "You don't owe me anything. I'll see you right enough till you're strong. After that, you'll move on." But she shook her head. "There's nowhere else." The days stretched into weeks. At first, Elias kept his distance. He rose before dawn, fed the stock, rode fence lines. When he returned, he'd find Clara sweeping the floor with a willow broom she'd made herself, or sewing torn shirts with precise, careful stitches. She left biscuits cooling on the windowsill, their scent filling the house that had long smelled only of dust and firewood. Still, Elias did not soften. He kept a quiet wall around his words, answering short, avoiding her eyes. But Clara may notice things: the way he set aside the choicest cut of meat for her plate, the way he lingered outside the door before entering, as if to give her dignity. Small mercies, unspoken. The town noticed, too. One Sunday, when Elias rode into Dalton's Crossing for supplies, he felt eyes on him. Whispers curled like smoke. "That woman," they muttered, "stayed at Whitlock's place. You know what she offered him, don't you? Called herself his wife." Shame burned hotter than sun on his neck, though he'd done nothing but keep his soul from dying. Still, gossip was wildfire, and soon it reached Clara. She stood in the doorway when he returned, hands folded, gaze lowered. "I know what they're saying," she murmured. "That I'm not fit for your home. That I'm—" she faltered, biting her lip. Elias clenched his jaw. "Don't pay him no mind. But she looked at him with something like sorrow. "You be better rid of me." He wanted to agree. He wanted to send her packing and be done with the talk, the stares, the quiet storm she brought to his once quiet world. But when he looked at her, barefoot still, but stronger now, her eyes no longer hollow but alive with stubborn light, he could not. Instead, he only said, "Supper's getting cold." And so she stayed. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains, fierce with thunder. The two of them sat by the fire, silence stretching between them. Clara's hands worked a patch of cloth, but her eyes strayed often to Elias. Finally, she set the cloth down. "Why do you live alone, Elias?" His chest tightened. No one had asked him that in years. He stared into the fire. "Because it's easier." Her voice was gentle. Easier doesn't mean better. The words sank into him like slow rain into dry earth. The next weeks brought both tension and fragile peace. Clara moved about the ranch with quiet purpose, tending chickens, hanging laundry, singing low songs that softened the edges of silence. Elias found himself watching when she didn't see, listening for her humming, noting the way her laughter, rare as it was, cut through his loneliness like sunlight through clouds. Yet outside their walls, the town grew harsher. Gossip turned bitter. Men at the saloon muttered crude jests. Women at the mercantile turned cold shoulders. One afternoon, Elias overheard the storekeeper's wife hiss. "He keeps her there like a bought woman." When he returned home, jaw set tight, Clara noticed his storm-dark eyes. "What do they say?" she asked softly. Nothing worth repeating. But she pressed, and finally the truth spilled. Her face went pale, but then she straightened, chin lifting. "Let them talk," she said firmly. "I've lived through worse words." Still, Elias carried the sting. He could endure loneliness, but he could not endure seeing her shamed. The turning point came on a raw morning in late autumn. Elias had ridden into town for feed when a pair of ranch hands cornered Clara near the well behind the mercantile. "Well now," one drawled, circling her like a buzzard, "if it ain't Whitlock's charity case. Heard you offered yourself to him. What'll you offer us?" Their laughter was coarse, cutting. Clara backed against the wall, breath sharp, eyes searching for escape. But before harm could come, Elias appeared. His shadow fell long across the dirt, his voice low and deadly. "You boys got business with me." They stammered excuses, but Elias's stare burned them down. He did not raise a hand, but the weight of his presence sent them scattering. When they were gone, he turned to Clara. She trembled, clutching her shawl. "You shouldn't have to bear this," he said, voice breaking. Her eyes filled, but she steadied herself. "I told you, I've borne worse." "But Elias," she hesitated, then whispered, "why do you keep saving me if you don't want me here?" The question cut him open. He looked at her, really looked, at the lines of weariness softened by resilience, at the fire hidden in her gaze. She was not just surviving anymore. She was fighting to belong. And in that moment, Elias understood. He was no longer saving her. She was saving him. That night, the air between them shifted. They sat on the porch, the stars burning clear above. Clara's bare feet brushed the wood, her shawl pulled tight. Elias sat beside her, silent, hands clasped. Finally, he spoke. "When you first came, I thought you bring nothing but trouble." Her lips curved faintly. "And did I?" He exhaled. "Yes, trouble I reckon I needed." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Neither promise nor confession, but a fragile seed of trust. As winter approached, the ranch became their sanctuary. Together they hauled firewood, mended fences, cooked suppers that filled the cabin with warmth. The loneliness that once smothered Elias began to ease, replaced by a quiet companionship. But the outside world would not leave them be. One bitter night, a fire broke out in Dalton's Crossing. Flames swallowed the saloon, threatening to spread through the town. Elias and Clara rode in to help form the bucket line. In the chaos, Clara heard voices, women crying out, "Don't let her near. She'll curse the work." Old superstitions fanned by gossip. Clara froze, the weight of rejection pressing down. But then Elias's hand found hers, steady and sure. He pulled her forward. "She's with me," he said loud enough for all to hear. And in that blaze-lit night, side by side, they fought the fire until it was tamed. The next morning, when smoke still curled over the ruins, Townsfolk regarded them differently. Some with shame for their words, others with grudging respect. Clara had not cursed them. She had helped save them. Later, back at the ranch, Clara stood at the threshold of the cabin, her dress singed, hair smelling of smoke. She looked at Elias, her voice quiet but clear. "You could have turned me away that first night. You didn't. And now," she faltered, then gathered her courage. "Now I can't imagine life anywhere else but here." Elias stepped closer, rough hands trembling slightly. "Then stay. Not out of bargain. Not out of desperation. Stay because you belong." Her eyes shone, and for the first time, she smiled, unbroken, unashamed. The winter that followed was hard, but not lonely. The cabin that once echoed with silence now hummed with the sound of shared labor, shared meals, shared laughter. Gossip still lingered in town, but neither of them gave it weight anymore. What mattered was the fire that burned steady between them, kindled by small acts of grace, hardened by storms weathered together. And so, dear listener, if you carry loneliness heavy as stone, remember this. Sometimes grace arrives not in grand declarations, but in weary footsteps across the prairie, in a voice cracked with desperation, in two souls daring to believe they might heal each other. For love in the West was seldom a thunderclap. More often, it was a slow flame, fragile, steady, and bright enough to warm the coldest nights.